anatomy, yes? Okay, so the largest airway has the loudest sound. The smallest airway, all the way down to those alveoli, have the quietest sound. And your book describes it like the rustling of leaves, okay? Like when the wind blows and the leaves fly away. You'll know that nice quiet sound. Okay, the largest sounds, the loudest sounds are over your trachea. We call those bronchial. You only hear them in the front because in the back, you can't hear your trachea. The smallest, quietest sounds all the way on the outsides of our lungs. When those airways are breaking down smaller and smaller and smaller, we call those vesicular sounds. So the loudest ones are bronchial and the quietest ones are vesicular. Well, the medium-sized pipes are in between the largest and the smallest. And the medium-sized sounds are in between the loudest and the quietest. So they took the name of the loudest and the quietest and they put them together, and that's what they call the medium-sized sounds, bronchovesicular. So now where are these sounds? When I'm a nurse and I want to listen, where can I expect to find these sounds? Now, different books say slightly different things. So what we want you as a Nursing 113 student to know is this. You will only auscultate the bronchial sounds in the front over the trachea, and that's where the yellow dots are. There's no yellow dots looking at the guy posterior. You can only hear it in the front over the trachea. The bronchovesicular sounds are those medium-sized pipes. And in the front, it's the pink 1, 2, and 3. Now, I know that this picture only shows 2. I know. I got the best picture I could get, and I couldn't color it on here. But I'm telling you, bronchovesicular in the front is at the first, second, and third intercostal space. And you remember from the picture before, the first is way up here. It's under the clavicle, right? That space is right before that sternal manubrium sternal notch. The second one is right below the second intercostal space, and the third one is right below the third intercostal space. But look at the picture, very close to the sternal border. From the back, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, very close between the scapula. We don't have a sternal border in the back. There's no sternum, but it's between the scapula, close to the middle. Because what's going on anatomically under there? That's where things are breaking apart. If I go to the second intercostal space in the front, close to the sternal border, it's bronchovesicular because I have medium-sized pipes there. If I go to the second intercostal space on the back of the patient between the scapula, it's bronchovesicular because it's medium-sized pipes there. But the front or the back, if I go out to the side, y'all, way out here, look at the picture, the dots turn blue. That's because things are breaking down as I get further away from the sternum or further out from the scapula. And then all the way at the bottom and at the top. Does that make sense? If you look at this picture, does that make sense? Okay, good. So once again, the loudest sounds are only in the front over the bronchus. The quietest sounds are all around the periphery of my lungs, in the front and the back. The bronchovesicular sounds, the medium-sized sounds, or what's the reason why they sound that way is because that's where the pipes are medium-sized. They're not those tiny ones all along the outside. And that only happens anatomically right in the middle of my chest. In the front, it's along the sternal borders, and in the back, it's between the scapula. Make sense? Let me see some head shakes, some thumbs up, something. Give me some. All right, there's a bunch of thumbs up. All right. Now let's talk about the timing. The timing is just, it's not hard. But if I put my stethoscope over the person's trachea, I'm going to hear that inspiration right away. Right away. I hear it right away. And then expiration is longer. Vesicular, it takes a long time for the air to get all the way down to the bottom. So it's long inspiration and shorter expiration. Along the sternal border, inspiration should equal expiration. So we have it pictured like this: inspiration less than expiration bronchial, inspiration equals expiration bronchivesicular, and inspiration greater than expiration vesicular. And I just drew it this way for people who saw things better, like in a graph as opposed to a picture. That is the sounds and the timing of respirations. That's just the anatomy behind it. In a little bit, we're going to talk about what does this have to do with you as a nurse. Okay, normal breath sounds, eupnea, are nice and quiet. I don't see any accessory muscles. I don't hear any sounds. They're nice and quiet. And the only way you're going to learn what a normal breath sound sounds like is to what? Starts with a P?
Practice.
Thank you. So you all are going to get your stethoscope out this weekend, and you're going to listen to your mommy, your daddy, your uncle, your brother, the mailman. But we do have to be respectful of COVID. So maybe not. In a non-COVID world, you would do that. In a COVID world, you're going to do everybody in your little pod. Okay? All right. I want you to know, what happens, Mystique, if they're not nice and quiet? What if I hear something called an adventitious sound? An adventitious sound is the nursing word for an abnormal breath sound. Next semester, you're going to tease those out into fine and coarse sounds like crackles and rails and wheezes or rhonchis or pleural rubs or stridor. Now, this semester, we said that a sound that you heard a patient breathing, like without your stethoscope, grunting, wheezing, those are abnormal breath sounds and indicative of possible dyspnea, right? This is sounds with your stethoscope, adventitious breath sounds. So if you're listening, you don't know what it is, but you know from practicing that it's not what it's supposed to be. It's not quiet. It's not the rustling of leaves. I'm hearing something else. You have to have, if you ask the patient to cough, frequently that will take care of the whole problem for you. Because when they cough, whatever was blocking that airway that you're listening to, it'll clear the airway and you'll go back to clear and equal. So now how do you actually do it? You have your stethoscope in your hand. You're going to use the diaphragm side. I say a zigzag pattern. What I mean by that is I'm going to listen to the right side and then the left, or the left side and then the right. I'm going to go side to side. Look at the picture, side to side. Why do you think I don't go all the way down the right and then all the way down the left? Why do you think?
Maybe you look for symmetry.
Thank you. What did I say we're going to hear over and over in this lecture? Symmetry and equality, symmetry and equality. I want to see if what I'm hearing here, I'm hearing here. And what I'm hearing here, I'm hearing here. What I'm hearing here, I'm hearing here. I expect this to be different than this, right? Because this airway is further away. It's going to be the quiet rustling of leaves. Next to the sternum here, it's going to be louder because this is bronchovesicular at the second intercostal space. Way out here is going to be vesicular. Yes? Yes, okay. So the instruction you give your patient is I want you to breathe in and out through your mouth. If you tell them to breathe deeply in and out through their mouth, and it's an older person, they're probably going to pass out on you. So you want them to breathe in and out through their mouth. And if you hear an adventitious sound and they cough and it's still there, then ask them to take a deep breath so that you can validate what you think you're hearing. But we're going to start off with just breathe in and out through your mouth. And you're going to go in a side-to-side pattern. Now look, you see that little disclaimer I put on that picture? It says, this picture is not exact for stethoscope placement as discussed in class from me right now. I'm just trying to show you the zigzag pattern. Okay, because where the book recommends in the skills book and what we tell you to do is you're going to put that diaphragm at the second intercostal space, in and out, then the second intercostal space, in and out. Then you're going to come down to the fourth intercostal space, in and out, to the fourth intercostal space, in and out. 6, 6, 8, and 8. So the front of the body is 2, 2, 4, 4, 6, 6, 8, 8. Now, I've never seen a nurse take the stethoscope, go up to the patient and start doing this so she can find 2, 2, 4, 4, 6, 6, and 8, 8. How are you going to learn where 2, 2, 4, 4, 6, 6, and 8, 8 are?
Practice.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. So 2, 2, 4, 4, 6, 6, 8, 8. Remembering to go inside to side, and the 2, 2, you're close to the sternal border, and as you work your way out, you're going to make what looks like an A. Everybody with me? On the back side of the patient, we're going to do 3, 3, 6, 6, 9, 9. 3, 3 is going to be between the scapula, 3, 3. Then I'm going to come down to 6, 6, make it an A. I'm going to come out, and 9, 9 is going to be all the way down here on the sides. Your instructor, the next time you are together, will show you where she places the stethoscope for 3, 3, 6, 6, 9, 9 in the back, 2, 2, 4, 4, 6, 6, 8, 8 in the front. We're good? Everybody understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. I like seeing those fingers up. Okay. So how would, this is just exactly what I said just now. In the front, you can listen to the trachea first. And what kind of sounds am I going to hear at the trachea, people?
Loud.
Bronchial, right. Then at the second, 2, 2, 4, 4, 6, 6, and 8, 8. I expect the second one close to the sternal border to be bronchovesicular. And then as I move down, 4, 4, 6, 6, 8, 8, I'm moving away from the sternum. Those are going to be vesicular sounds. In the back, that third intercostal space between the scapula, that's going to be what kind of sounds? Bronchial, vesicular, and then 6, 6, and 9, 9 will be vesicular sounds. I can't hear just bronchial from the back because that's only over the trachea. Everybody got it? Heads up, thumbs up.
Wait, so 6 and 9 are the smallest sounds you hear, or?
That's right. 9's going to be quieter than 6, but 6 is quiet. It's considered vesicular. You need to go back up a couple of things in your notes and look. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3 next to the sternal border in the front. 1, 2, 3, and 4 between the scapula and the back. 6 is not between 1 and 4 in the back. So 6 is vesicular. Everybody understand? All right. Y'all, nursing school is not how smart you are. Nursing school is how much time can you give this. The first time I say you palpate the systolic blood pressure so that you can avoid an auscultatory gap, you're like, that might as well be German. But then the more you say it and the more you think about it and the more time you give to it, the more it makes sense. And when you stop just trying to memorize the words, but you think about what I'm telling you, if you take the time to think about it and break it down, that's how you become successful in nursing school. But that takes time. You can't hear it one time and figure it out. You have to go back and look at this and think about what she said. What's going on underneath at the second and the fourth and the sixth and the eighth in order to understand the sounds. Then you're not memorizing it, you're understanding it. And that takes time. You can't look at this one time. Yes? Okay. So this is how you would chart it. And again, the charting is going to be all at the end. All right, let's talk about the heart. Oh, Lord, the heart, the heart, the heart. You guys need to know the anatomy of the heart in order to understand this. And so what I should not be teaching the anatomy of the heart. You should know this from anatomy, but what I found is that you don't. So here's a fast review, and you're going to have to remember this on your own. You got 4 chambers, 2 atria at the top, 2 ventricles at the bottom. You have valves between them. Between the atria and the ventricles are called AV valves. Between the ventricles and leaving the body, Those are called semilunar valves. I want you to think of the valves of the heart like doors to your house, okay? The ventricle is the room I'm talking about. When that ventricle contracts, we said that's systole, correct? And when systole happens, I need the front doors, I need the semilunar valves to be open so that the blood can get out. Yes? Yes. When those front doors are open so the blood can get out, the back doors have to close. The AV valves have to close. If they don't, the blood's going to back up. It's going to take the path of least resistance. It's a lot easier to go back up than it is to go out and fight all that force of getting the blood out to the periphery of the body. Yeah. So that AV valve has to close. That back door has to close for the blood to go in the right direction. Okay. Then when the ventricle's filling up, I need my back door to be open now so the blood can come from the atria down into the ventricle. And I need my front door to be closed so the blood's not sneaking out to the aorta. As the pressure builds up, I don't want it to sneak out. I want it to wait until I'm ready. Yes? Heads up. That's about as basic as I can get it. Okay, but here's what I want you to know. The valve between the left atria and the left ventricle is the mitral valve, okay? It's located around the fifth left intercostal space midclavicular line. You told me that was the PMI, right? When that left ventricle contracts to let the blood out, that back door has to close. And when that back door closes, that's what you hear. That's S1, that's systole. That's lub, okay? So it makes sense. The left ventricle is the workhorse. It's squeezing. It's putting the blood out. The ventricle closes the door so the blood doesn't go the wrong way. And you hear that as lub, S1. Loudest, down at the PMI, where that mitral valve is. Everybody understand that? That's the basic anatomy you have to understand before we go forward. Yes? And if you don't understand it, because you don't remember anatomy, you're going to play this back or go look it up until you figure it out, okay? So the heart basically lies between the second and the fifth intercostal space. And you know, your heart doesn't look like a Valentine. Your heart looks like a fist. And it lays in your chest, just like this. I don't know if y'all can see me. It's just like this, in the middle. Most of it, look, it's under the sternum. That's why when we do CPR, we're pushing down on that sternum, right? But there's a little bit up, a little bit on the right side at the second intercostal space and a little bit on the left side. But then most of it's on the left. So when I listen, when I do a pulse, I palpate a radial. If I feel something irregular, I auscultate the apical for a full minute to validate by auscultation what I'm palpating. That was a question on the post-vital sign test that I'm sure you went over with your instructor. So if I'm doing that, I'm going right to the PMI. But if I'm doing a cardiac assessment, head to toe, cardiac assessment, I need to listen over the valves. It's 4 valves. I need to listen over those valves. I'm listening for those doors closing. And where those valves are located on the body is at the second intercostal space on both the right and the left. It's on the right because it's peeking out a little bit on the right, and then it's on the left. Then the third intercostal space on the left, close to the sternal border. The fourth intercostal space on the left, close to the sternal border, that's the tricuspid valve. That's between the right atria and the ventricle. And then when we kick out to that midclavicular line where that circle is, that's the PMI. That's the S1. We hear that loudest on systole because that's where that back door's shutting. That mitral valve's closing there. And that's where I'm gonna listen. That's part of my cardiac assessment. So when I do the cardiac assessment, I'm going over the valves because I want to hear the valves closing. So it's close to the sternal border. Y'all look at me. Right 2, left 2, left 3, left 4, left 5, kick out to the midclavicular line. I have several pictures to show you. I have several things I put it for y'all to print to look at. I printed that whole thing about the nurse and the beating heart, all in an effort to help you understand this.
So the sounds you hear is not exactly at the location when you find the heart. It's just like how do I say? It's in the different places that you see in the heart, right?
Okay, first of all, I'm gonna ask you to please hold your questions to the end. I promise, at the end, I'm gonna sit down and answer all your questions.
I'm sorry,
Jot
I'm
it
sorry.
down and go. No, it's okay, it's okay. All right, are they in that exact location? Y'all, life is not black and white. Our patients are not mannequins. The whole point of you learning to do an assessment is you're looking for something abnormal. You take a piece of assessment data and then you analyze that data. So if you heard something in a different place, now clearly you can't go from the second intercostal space to the fifth. I mean, hey, that heart's really not in the right place, right? But if it's like a little bit off, the first thing you want to say to yourself is, first of all, I assess my patient. Is my patient okay? Is my patient showing any dire, life-threatening characteristics from whatever the abnormality is that I find while I'm doing my assessment? First question, assess the patient. Second question, is this new? How do I know if this is new? I go back and I look and see what the guy found behind me, the way they documented their landmarks, right? If it's new, I'm gonna tell somebody. If it's not, and everybody knows, and the patient's not in any distress, it's like me with the uvula that's cocked to the side. That uvula has been cocked to the side since I'm a teenager. I don't think it's giving me any, I probably have neurological damage. That may be some of my problems, but everybody knows it's in my chart. Is, you know, I'm okay. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yes.
Okay, good. So what you need to know is, where is the normal places? We said second intercostal close to the sternal border, left intercostal close to the sternal border, left third close to the sternal border, left fourth close to the sternal border, and then left fifth midclavicular line. Look, this is what's going on under there. That's where the aortic valve is. That's where the pulmonic valve is. That's those semilunar valves. At the third intercostal space, close to the sternal border, there's no valve there. That's called Erb's point. That's something to put in the back of your mind for next semester when you start to listen to abnormal heart sounds. I'm teaching you normal heart sounds. When you get to abnormal, that's a good place to hear for murmurs in your future. Fourth intercostal space, that's between the right atria and ventricle, and the fifth left intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, is the mitral valve between the left atria and the left ventricle. And when it closes, that's where you hear it the loudest. And that's where we go for our apical pulse that we count for a full minute if we want to give a medicine, because we said it's the most accurate. Everybody remember that? Yes? Okay. So how do I remember this, Mystique? Well, you see on that little guide to the right, A for aorta, P for pulmonic, E for Erb's point, T for tricuspid, and M for mitral. Some people say that stands for All People Enjoy Time magazine. Some people use ape to man. You use whatever you want. I've given you several ways now to explain it. It's telling you there the name of the valve and where it's located. Here it is yet again. What valve is at that spot? When I do a cardiac assessment, when I'm doing vital signs, no. I'm not doing this for vital signs. This is a cardiac assessment when I'm doing my head to toe. And you should put the stethoscope right 2, left 3, left 4, left 5, kick out to the middle. Now, 20 minutes ago, you didn't know what right 2, left 3, left 4, all close to the sternal border, and 5, kick out to the midclavicular line. You didn't know what that meant 20 minutes ago. But do you know what it means now? Thumbs up, somebody? Okay, good. 20 thumbs up. Everybody understands. Awesome. So can you get this the first time I say it? No, that's why you're supposed to prepare for class. So now you need to just keep looking at this and keep looking at it and try to understand what's underneath what I'm telling you, because then you don't have to memorize it. Then you can just do it by understanding it, which is how you have to get through nursing school, because people aren't black and white. So we can't just tell you black and white exactly this is how it works. That's what makes nursing school a little more difficult than anything else you've done before. So if I were going to teach a group of students who knew their anatomy, I could start with this slide. Assessment of the heart is the apical heart sound. Systole, or S1, is the lub. It's the mitral valve closing. That all should make sense. It's the apical pulse. It's at the fifth left intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. I'm looking for a regular rhythm. I want it to be 60 to 100 beats per minute. And this is how I chart it. AP is at the fifth left intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, 72 minutes and regular. Why don't I have an amplitude on there? Because amplitude comes from palpating the periphery. I am now listening with my stethoscope and auscultating. S1 is the lub. Systole, the ventricles are squeezing shut. Blood is ejecting. I hear it as S1. It's the closure of the AV valves. Where does the blood go? It's going out to the periphery. The nurse feels it as a pulse. Y'all remember we said it's like this. This is my ventricle contracting. Contract, contract, contract. This is my fingers feeling the pulse. So it's like this. Systole, I feel the pulsation, blood get out of the way. Diastole, the ventricles relax. It's the pulsation in between. Yeah? All right. S2, that's when the ventricle's at rest. It's the sound now, what's closing? The semilunar valves are closing now, not the AV valves. So if S1 is louder at the PMI, then S2 is quieter there. So we want to know, okay, Mystique, you just got finished telling me all this normal stuff. What would be abnormal? Abnormal would be an apical pulse. That's not where it's supposed to be. It's not at the fifth left intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. I've taken care of NICU babies where the heart's on the wrong side of the chest. So I'm not going to hear it at their fifth left intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. I'm going to hear it someplace else. The rate is too fast or too slow. There's too many sounds. It's not that regular rhythm. It's an irregular rhythm. We call that a dysrhythmia. And there's a murmur, which is an abnormal heart sound. You're going to learn all about this next semester. I'm just trying to show you one more time how to do this. Second intercostal space close to the sternal border. Second intercostal space on the left, close to the sternal border. Left intercostal space, close to the sternal border. Fourth intercostal space, close to the sternal border. Fifth intercostal space, I'm kicking out to the mid-clavicular line, and it's I'm listening to the valves close under there. Golly, y'all, I don't think I can do it one more time. PMI. The PMI on a guy is like right at the nipple line. On a girl, it's right at the nipple line too, except sometimes the nipples are like, you got to pick them up from their knees. If a woman lays down, it's easier to find. You need to displace that breast in order to hear that PMI. You remember we said earlier, you're going to use the dorsal side of your hand. You put your hand under her breast. To displace your breast so I can listen to your heart. You got to pick that puppy way up and out of the way because you got to get under there where that nipple line would be on a guy, right? I've never seen a nurse go up to a patient and do this 2, 3, 4, 5. No, practice. You're going to learn. Now for check off, you're going to have to do that. So we know you know how to do it. But through practice, you're going to learn where to just put your stethoscope so you can count that PMI. And this is how we chart it. Okay, now we're going to go to the abdomen. Now we said we IPA, we inspect, we palpate, we auscultate. When we get to the abdomen, we're going to change the order. Now we're going to inspect, auscultate, and palpate. Why am I going to auscultate before I palpate? I'm going to tell you why. If you have a Coke in your hand, you're bringing in a bag of groceries and you drop the Coke, and that 2-liter Coke drops with its little plastic cell and it rolls all over the place. When you pick that Coke up, what's going to happen when you open it? Coke's going to go everywhere, right? When you palpate that abdomen, you're shaking stuff up in there. And so when you shake it up, you might get an irregular or an abnormal or something that's not true of your patient, let's say. You're not going to get their true vowel sounds when you listen because they all shook up, okay? So we inspect first. Then we auscultate while things are still quiet, and then we go back and we palpate. So let's take a look at what am I looking for when I inspect. We talked about the landmarks of the chest. The landmark of your abdomen is the umbilicus or your belly button. Look at the picture. And then you divided abdomen into 4. And we have the right upper quadrant, the left upper quadrant, the right lower quadrant, and the left lower quadrant. It's not a bad idea to know what's going on under there, under each quadrant. Because when we start talking about distension, where the abdomen is larger and maybe more firm, if it's just one spot on the right upper, left lower, or right lower, what's going on under there that might be causing that, as opposed to the whole abdomen being distended? And a really one that you're going to see over and over is suprapubic. You know, let me show you. You got this bone right here. Let's see if I can get the thing right here. This bone, there's a bone at the top of your pelvis. If y'all feel like that's a bone, pubic bone, yeah? Supra, above the pubic bone, is called the suprapubic area of your abdomen. And what lives in the suprapubic area of your abdomen? Anybody know?
Bladder.
The bladder, right. So if the abdomen is not distended only in that one spot in the suprapubic area, it's a piece of assessment data. Let me analyze it further. Do you have to go to the potty? I might ask that patient, because they probably do. And if they don't, and it's distended, that's even more of analyzing a piece of assessment data I'm going to want to report. She has a distended bladder and she's not having the urge to go. So, okay, we're on inspection. I inspect the landmarks. I inspect the shape and the contour. Look over to the right. That's some different shapes you might see. Flat. Not many people have a totally flat abdomen. A lot do, but most people are rounded. Rounded's okay. Get a little bit of a roundness to your belly. Scaphoid, we need to give that person some dinner. And protuberant, that's either pregnant or that's somebody who's overweight. Or there's a problem under there. You see, that could be 3 different things. I'd have to assess. I had to take that piece of assessment data and analyze it. So then the distension is larger and firm. Where? Is it all over? Is it just one quadrant? Is it just the suprapubic area? What else am I looking for? I'm looking for scars, striae. Striae is the nursing word for stretch marks. I'm looking for bruising. The nursing word is ecchymosis. I'm looking for ascites. That was that picture we had in the beginning. So first I look. Then what do we say is next? Auscultate. I'm going to use my stethoscope. I'm going to use the diaphragm side. And I'm going to start, it's very frequent to start in the bottom right, because that's where the ileocecal valve comes together and it's going to be the loudest. But you can start anywhere, but you need to listen in each quadrant. Now, what am I listening for? You're listening for the sounds of peristalsis. What's happening? What do you hear going on? What's going on under the skin that I can't see? Stuff's moving along. The intestines, correct? Y'all remember that from anatomy. The timing of that sound is very important. What does a normal bowel sound like? What's the only way you're gonna know? Yes, thank you. You need to get your stethoscope out and listen to everybody who will let you listen to their bellies, right? So you're listening for the sound. So it's like gurgle, gurgle, crackle, crackle, a noise. So what you want to do is you want to have your watch and you have your stethoscope and you put it on their belly and you hear gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. And so you watch, okay? How many seconds in between one gurgle to the next? And you need to hear 3 or 4 gurgles in each quadrant before you go to the next quadrant, so that you can figure out how many seconds in between each gurgle, okay? How many seconds in between the gurgles, and you listen to all 4 quadrants. Well, what's it supposed to be? If I hear a gurgle every 5 to 20 seconds, that's considered normal. If I hear a gurgle more than 20 seconds apart, that's too slow. That's hypoactive. If I hear a gurgle fast, less than 5 seconds apart, gurgle, 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 that's too fast. That's considered hyperactive. What if I don't hear anything at all? Is there ever a time when it's okay not to hear anything at all? Well, it depends on what's going on. If my patient just had anesthesia, then it might be okay, because when I give a patient general anesthesia to totally knock out the phrenic nerve that causes them to breathe and knock out all the nerve innervations that causes them to move, I'm basically paralyzing them. I am also knocking out the nerve innervation for the peristalsis. So somebody who's just coming out of general anesthesia, this might happen to. Somebody who, if they have an obstruction, or if they have a twisting of the bowel, or if the bowel slips inside of itself, called intussusception, or if they had a lot of adhesions from surgery, if there's something that's blocking it off, I won't hear it. So that would not be a good thing. And I would want to report that. So what I would have to do is tell my coworkers, hey, look, I'm not hearing bowel sounds. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to listen for a full 5 minutes in each quadrant. Now, that's 20 minutes of your time. You're going to have to get help with other patients so you can go in there and really do that. I tell this little story at this point in the lecture. My sister was a nurse like me. She had been a nurse for, well, she had been a school teacher first, and then she went to nursing school, and she worked with me in surgery, and we worked together for like 10 years. So she's a nurse. She knows what she's doing. And she calls me at school one day, and she says, hey, Ann, what do you do when you can't poop? Well, that's rather personal. Well, what do you mean? So she's having trouble. She can't poop. So I say, okay, I'll go get you an enema from Walgreens. So I go to Walgreens, and I get the enema, and I bring it to her. And I'm like, here you go. Like, do you need help? She says, no, I got it. Ooh, good. So I leave her with the enema. She's going to lay on the bathroom floor on her left side. She's going to give herself the enema. I come home, take care of my kids. I'm not worried about her anymore. What I didn't know is that later that day, when she didn't get the results from the enema she wanted, she called my other sister who sells jewelry and doesn't know anything about medicine. And she asked her, this nurse is asking the jewelry person, what do you do when you can't poop? She says, oh, that's the sister who I told you only poops once a week. No problem. I take milk and magnesia. I'm going to go to Walgreens. I'll buy you some milk and magnesia. And they had a milk and magnesia party, those two. Fast forward a couple of hours, I get a phone call from my niece, who's my sister's daughter, who says, you got to come to the hospital right away. I'm like, why? Well, I get there. My sister was an x-ray. And when she came out, y'all, this woman looked 1,000 months pregnant. I'm not believing this belly that I'm seeing. Like, what did you do? This was not like this a little while ago. Well, she drank that milk and magnesia, and things sped up, and it was hitting a brick wall. When they did the x-rays and the ultrasounds, they found out that she had a growth inside her body, outside of the intestines, but it was big enough that it was pushing against the intestines, and it had totally occluded the pathway. So everything was hitting this brick wall, and she had this big old giant belly. And if we had only listened, I know y'all gonna think I'm a terrible nurse. I take a blood pressure cuff with my husband with the wrong size cuff. Here's my sister, I'm giving it. If we had only listened to her abdomen, we wouldn't have heard bowel sounds distal to the blockage. Okay, but we didn't do that. She didn't do that. She drank the milk and magnesia, sped things up, ended up with a big old giant belly, took the x-ray, saw it, and had emergency surgery the next morning to remove the tumor, which turned out to be malignant. How about that? So why am I telling you this? Because if you can put this in real life, you can understand that it's important. This isn't just words on a screen. This is something that you have to understand and be able to do. Okay, what is the patient? Let's go back. What is this guy going to look like? The one who's...
I keep hearing like somebody else's mic on every now and then, like a shh sound behind your voice.
So all I can do is ask for people to like I can see right now, there's some people who don't have their microphones muted. Please mute your microphone. If the person's bowel sounds are less than every 5 seconds, they're slow. What do you think that person's going to look like? They're going to have a distended belly. They're going to look like my sister, distended belly, right? I'm not going to hear bowel sounds. What if they have really fast bowel sounds? They ate a bad taco. They're going to be running to the bathroom. They may be dehydrated. They may have sluggish skin turgor because they're losing all their fluids. Make sense? Make sense? Okay. So we auscultate, first we inspect, then we auscultate, then we palpate. This is the exact same slide from the first half of the lecture. It's exactly the same thing. Use the pads of your hand, go in a circular fashion, 1 or 2 centimeters deep, not real deep. And what am I feeling for? I'm feeling for lumps, bumps, and ouchies. Any distensions, any tenderness. So our next slide leaves the abdomen and we start on the vasculature. So we're going to take a break. It's 9:18. I'll see you guys at 9:25 and we will continue on. So I'm going to pause the recording. Please remind me to start the recording. Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt